Petrida. J'ai vu Petrida, c'est Petrida. Bon, je vais dans le chat. Hello there.
Bienvenue à tous qui viennent de nous rejoindre. Nous allons commencer d'ici quelques minutes. Alors, je suis Aminetou Bilal de la Mauritanie. Donc, j'aurai le plaisir de modérer cette session d'ouverture qui va commencer d'ici quelques minutes. Donc, so welcome to everyone. I will moderate this opening session that will start in a few minutes. So welcome to this Pan-African Youth virtual consultation on malaria and universal health coverage, which is one of the key outcomes of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. I am pleased to welcome Her Excellency Amira Al-Fadil, the AU Commissioner for Social Affairs.
Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, President of Kenya, and Chairperson of the African Union Leaders on Malaria Alliance, ALMA, Excellency Commissioner Sarah, Excellencies Ministers, our AU Youth Envoy Aya Shapi, Dr. Benjamin, and all participants. Let me begin by commending African youth on the Pan-African Youth Virtual Consultation that is set to increase youth participation for increased action, advocacy, resource mobilization, and promotion to defeat malaria by 2030. Building the capacity of youth in Africa to be able to make their own decisions on health and to take responsibility for health is a smart and pragmatic economic intervention for the continent. the African Union Commission upholds the centrality of youth empowerment for health as attested in the Africa Health Strategy and the catalytic framework to end TB, malaria, and to end TB and eliminate malaria in Africa by 2030. Specifically, these policy frameworks identify the need to empower youth with skills and knowledge to attain good health and prosperity in the context of the African Union Constitutive Act, the Africa Youth Charter, and the AU Roadmap on harnessing the demographic dividend through investment in youth. Also AU Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Excellencies, I encourage African Union member states to strengthen implementation of these policies and to continue to implement youth-friendly services and disease control programs for malaria and for elimination of all pandemics and all communicable and non-communicable diseases. Excellencies, young people are tomorrow's future. Their actions today will determine maternal health, education levels, and build a strong foundation for Africa's human capital, development, and the socio-economic transformation of our continent. It will be positioning Africa as a competitive player in the global political economy. We must devise ways of reaching every segment of the youth population with the services they require, recognizing that one size does not fit all. The African Union Commission has set very clear priorities with matching bold and ambitious targets to fast-track the end of malaria, and we are left with about 10 years to make this a reality. It will be by 2030. The Africa Health Strategy and the catalytic framework to end AIDS, TB, and eliminate malaria in Africa by 2030 provide the broader framework within which this breakthrough will be attained. These policy frameworks also call for investment in young Africans and adolescents as a smart, pragmatic economic intervention with a high return on investment. Specifically, they identify the need to empower youth with skills and knowledge to attain good health and prosperity in the context of African Union's Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Our member states need to strongly advocate for an implementation for the pillars of continental policy frameworks which call for provision of appropriately tailored service and health care for the young Africans. The health and well-being of adolescents now and in their adult lives greatly depend on key education opportunities and access to quality health services that help them stay healthy, empowered, and embracing gender equality norms and demanding rights. We must amplify opportunities to acquire knowledge and equitable access to quality healthcare services. Excellencies, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has led to an upsurge in the use of digital platforms across the world where young people frequent. I encourage our member states to utilize all available platforms to reach and engage youth for malaria prevention, treatment and care, and good health altogether. No opportunity should be missed to provide adolescents with the information that will help them make responsible decisions about their health and overall well-being. Also, I would like to emphasize that Africa has the youngest population in the world. The continent's youthful population presents a powerful opportunity for accelerated economic growth and innovation. However, greater economic productivity will only manifest when young people are healthy, well-educated, and empowered to seize opportunities and thrive. Let us continue to work together towards empowering more youth to champion the elimination of malaria in Africa by 2030 and overall good health and prosperity in the continent. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now I'm pleased to welcome the AU Commissioner on HRST, Professor Sarah Anyang Agbo.
Good day. Today we are talking about the Pan-African Youth Virtual Consultation on Malaria and Universal Health Coverage. It is commonly said that health is wealth, and health is the essential jewel of life. It is therefore right to ponder a little bit on how we manage our health and how we treat our physical, psychological, mental, and spiritual health in order to derive all the energy we need to be productive citizens that engage in the construction of our society's well-being as envisaged in Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Public institutions should leverage on the potential of young people to eliminate malaria by 2030 and work with them for faster and more effective delivery of health services, especially to people in rural areas. The huge progress that has been recorded over the past decade in the fight against malaria is attributable to the commitment and engagement of public and private institutions in the response to malaria prevention and treatment. Young people could be effectively used in task shifting programs as community health agents who serve as a relay of health professionals in hard-to-reach geographical locations. Youth empowerment for resilience building and community empowerment is a workable solution to the objectives of the catalytic framework to end AIDS, TB, and eliminate malaria in Africa by 2030. Young people ownership of the African Union catalytic framework will lead toward the elimination of malaria in Africa. As actors for a positive change, young people can apply their leadership in public health by promoting intersectoral action and by participating in health public policies and accountability. Response to health challenges such as malaria should be part of national innovation programs and competitions that stimulate young people to find locally adapted innovative solutions for Africa problems. Education programs and curriculum for in and out of school youth should equally emphasize the importance of health education for young people. Such health education framework will increase awareness of the importance of realizing the potential benefits of the demographic dividend. There is a growing understanding of the interrelationship between education and health, which necessitates a more comprehensive and coordinated approach across the education and health sector. Let me end by congratulating the youth for initiating this Pan-African Youth Virtual Consultation on Malaria that will steer key actions, youth leadership, and urgency to defeat malaria. Remember what I'm fond of saying? If people say that you are too small to make a change, tell them they are yet to spend a night with a mosquito. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Madame Joy Executive Secretary of ALMA.
Good afternoon. We welcome youth leadership in driving change to win the fight against malaria and accelerate progress towards the achievement of universal health coverage. African youth are already actively engaged in sharing ideas on how to silence the guns through Africa's peace and security architecture. They are addressing gender equality. African youth are responding to COVID-19. We remained emboldened as ALMA Secretariat to work with young people to silence the mosquitoes that spread malaria. This is a guaranteed way to move the development agenda forward and achieve greater results from economic and social investments that's improving the well-being of communities. Let me take this opportunity to commend the African Union for its commitment to Africa's young people, as demonstrated by successive political commitments, including the African Union Constitutive Act, the African Youth Charter, and the African Union Roadmap on harnessing and reaping the demographic dividend through investments in young people that give priority to the youth and to youth empowerment and participation in the development of this continent. The 2017 African Union Roadmap on harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in young people is based on the conviction that young people hold the key to the Africa we want. This provides a strategic lens towards achieving the aspirations of Agenda 2063, whether it be through employment and entrepreneurship, or through education and skills development, or through health and well-being, or indeed through the rights, governance, and youth empowerment. The Pan-African Youth Digital Consultation that we are holding to develop a malaria youth engagement strategy is essentially a dialogue that will provide a strong foundation for further engagement to ensure a common position for intergenerational dialogue and engagement. We look to young people to be fully engaged in co-creating adequate and sustainable solutions for the Africa we want. The COVID-19 pandemic must not divert our attention from life-saving mosquito net distribution campaigns, from indoor residual spraying, from preventative treatments for pregnant women or for children. And it must not stop us from ensuring that we sustain access to case management. The Amhs transformational agenda depends on Africa's young people becoming active players in defining the broader health and development agenda, laying a strong foundation for Africa's inclusive economic growth, poverty reduction, peace and security, and shared prosperity. We are inspired by the commitment of my remarkable sisters, Their Excellencies, the Commissioner of Social Affairs and Human Resources and the Commissioner for Science and Technology, to advancing the fight against malaria and contributing towards universal health coverage. We celebrate this collaboration with the Youth Envoy in her capacity as the spokesperson of the African Union to the relevant African Union decision-making bodies. Her engagement with stakeholders at the global, continental, regional, and national levels, as well as the engagement of other youth in the continent, will provide invaluable guidance in ensuring that our engagement effectively harnesses the demographic trend for a malaria-free Africa. Zero malaria starts with me. Zero malaria starts with the youth. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Joy. And it is really important to emphasize what the youth are doing in fighting the malaria, and also supporting the importance of having a universal coverage, a universal health coverage. The African Union Youth Advisory Council and also the African Union Youth Special Envoy, Ms. Ayeshebi, she has quoted that it is important to make a call for action for member states and African leaders to effectively implement the African Youth Charter, which guarantees youth rights and contributions to be the custodians of their well-being and Africa's development. That is why the African Union established the flagship initiative of the African Youth Charter Hustlers to invest in youth to drive advocacy, accountability, and innovation in order to overcome diseases such as malaria. And donc je disais que l'envoyée spéciale de la jeunesse de l'Union africaine, Madame Aya Chebi, dans son discours pour l'appel à l'action pour les membres pays de l'Union africaine, qu'il est important d'implémenter la charte africaine de la jeunesse qui nous garantit donc nos droits en tant que jeunes et également cette charte africaine, si son implémentation est effective dans tous les pays, cela nous garantit notre santé et notre bien-être. Donc, il est important que les pays membres de l'Union africaine établissent une initiative, l'initiative qui avait été lancée, qui s'appelle African Youth Charter Hustlers. Donc, il est important, grâce à cette initiative, l'importance de cette initiative, c'est d'investir dans la jeunesse pour que cette jeunesse puisse conduire le plaidoyer et également demander des comptes, innover pour que nous puissions finir avec certaines maladies comme la malaria. Donc, il est important que la jeunesse s'engage effectivement et qu'elle s'engage à 100% dans tous les secteurs, à savoir le secteur de gouvernance, le secteur dans les prises de décision au niveau de la gouvernance. Il est important d'avoir l'avis de la jeunesse et que la jeunesse puisse apporter son leadership dans ces domaines-là. Nous allons tout de suite donc recevoir son Excellence, l'honorable ministre des Affaires, le ministre de la Santé dans le cabinet du président de la République du Kenya, qui va faire son discours au nom du président de la République du Kenya, son Excellence Uhuru Kenyatta. We are going now to have with us Honorable Mutahi Kagwe, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Health in the Republic of Kenya. On behalf of the President of Kenya, he will give his keynote speech.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Willis Akwale, a senior advisor with the African Leaders Malaria Alliance here in Nairobi. It is my pleasure this afternoon to welcome the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Honorable Mutahi Kagwe, to deliver a speech on behalf of the Chairman of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and all the youth who are with us this afternoon, it is my singular pleasure not only to wish you well, but I am here also to read the speech of His Excellency President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, who is currently the chairman of ALMA. And I will do that and go straight to his speech. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome the many young people across the African continent to this digital consultation forum to develop a youth engagement strategy to fight malaria. Although malaria is not only treatable, but also preventable, it is sad that it continues to afflict and kill many people on the African continent. There were 400,000 deaths due to malaria globally last year. 93% of those, unfortunately, occurred in sub-Saharan Africa, with the majority of them being women and children. As high as this number might seem, it is, however, gratifying to note that with increased investments made by countries and partners towards the fight against malaria during the past decade in Africa, it still constitutes a reduction in the burden of malaria from a high 900,000 deaths about 10 years ago. In Kenya, for example, we have been able to reduce the number of cases seen in our hospitals from 6 million to 4.6 million annually. It is for this reason that I set out a 4-point agenda to help African countries in their efforts to eliminate malaria in a sustainable way and contribute towards the achievement of universal health coverage. These efforts include: number one, the digitization and real-time access to malaria data at country level to ensure prompt and appropriate action by communities. Number two, engagement with regional economic communities as the key pillars to implement AU malaria commitments. Number three, the establishment of End Malaria Councils and funds to boost multi-sectoral action, resource mobilization, and the establishment of a youth army to create a broader social movement to fight malaria, improve maternal, child, and adolescent health, and improve access to universal health care. The vision of Africa Renaissance by founders of the African Union cannot be realized if we don't actively engage and invest in young people. Over 75% of Africa's 1.2 billion inhabitants are under the age of 35. It is evident that given proper investments, population dynamics can play a catalytic role in facilitating inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction. To achieve the bold and ambitious targets that we set in the catalytic framework to eliminate malaria in Africa by 2030, there is greater need to minimize the far-reaching social and economic implications of COVID-19 that threaten to derail Africa from its development path. Now is the time for the youth to get in the driver's seat and push the malaria agenda to meet set targets and avoid backtracking. More importantly, the youth should be on the forefront in the required efforts of fostering research that will lead to the implementation of high-impact interventions like the development of an effective vaccine. As part of the 4-point agenda, we shall be engaging the regional economic blocs to mobilize resources to invest in research and development with a view of ensuring progress is made towards the realization of an effective malaria vaccine that can be locally manufactured in Africa. Among lessons we have learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is the need for equity in production, distribution of supplies, and access by communities. It is time to re-engineer our supply chain systems to ensure that life-saving commodities reach the vulnerable populations where they are most needed. Use of information technology that our youths are very conversant with will go a long way in the re-engineering process. Hence, my call for digitization of malaria data that is readily available to those that are afflicted by the disease. Young people need the right opportunities to unlock their unlimited potential and energy for innovation and game-changing solutions. Broadly, harnessing Africa's youthful demographic dividend will spur the continent to greater economic heights against a background of positive economic growth. In Kenya, the youth are now getting increasingly engaged in our malaria control efforts. Currently, they are involved in spraying campaigns against the malaria-causing mosquito menace. Through the Generation Unlimited Youth Challenge, we are offering young people the opportunity to boost the economy and well-being of families. It is in this context that this Pan-African Youth Consultation on Malaria and Universal Health Coverage is a pathfinder to engage young people to mobilize collective youth-driven solutions to promote advocacy, resource mobilization, and practical local solutions to the malaria menace. I am calling on youth across Africa to build a Pan-African movement to adopt and advocate for this 4-point agenda alongside other malaria control initiatives. I urge each country to establish such youth initiatives so that we come up with one strong malaria army for Africa. I hope your deliberations at this consultative forum will be productive and come up with a practical and easy way to implement strategies that will galvanize efforts by the youth in Africa to get fully involved in our journey to defeat malaria once and for all. Remember though, for us to succeed, this must happen both at the national and regional levels, starting with the communities in which we live. I thank you and wish you success and an enjoyable consultative meeting.
Malaria is not only treatable, but also preventable. Thank you so much, Your Honorable the Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Mutahi Kahwe, for his wonderful messages. And thank you also to the AU Commissioners of the Social Affairs and HRST. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for ensuring young people co-lead in the fight of these important diseases and health issues that affect young people. My apologies for the technical issues. We are having internet issues here in Mauritania. So thank you again, Your Excellency. Thank you, the Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Mutahi Kahwe, for his wonderful message. And also thank you to the AU Commissioners of Social Affairs and HRST. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for ensuring young people co-lead in the fight of these important diseases and health issues that affect young people.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Aminata, for coordinating that session very well. And I really believe that we are really having a really interesting time, and I've really learned from a lot of our excellencies and our secretary today. So I will be standing on existing protocol to welcome and really recognize our excellency. Our excellencies present here today. First, we would like to welcome our excellency and recognize our excellency Commissioner Amira El Fadil, and also our excellency Commissioner Professor Sarah Agbo. I would also want to recognize Ms. Joy Fu Mapi, the Executive Secretary of the African Leaders for Malaria Alliance, and also everyone here present here today. So session one is a plenary discussion on how can youth advocate for malaria and universal health coverage. Yeah, though the question may look as a continent of over 1.2 million young people who are less than the ages of 35. We also really need to also examine the challenges that are facing Africa, especially as regards to malaria. Like according to the World Health Organization, 5 countries in the world had about half of the over 200 million cases of malaria in 2017, and 4 of them are from Africa. And really looking at the challenges we are facing and the energy which we can really use to drive these changes, we would really require the young people to really just be able to advocate for malaria and universal health coverage. And I believe it's going to be a wonderful session because we have really great speakers that are lined up today. And I would really be starting with the introduction of one of our speakers, who is Dr. Elvis Eze from Nigeria. Dr. Elvis Ikechukwu Eze, who is representing Africa Youth in the Diaspora, is a medical doctor with specialty interest in emergency medicine and disaster management. He has experience in global health policies and programs, particularly across the Commonwealth. He's focused on malaria elimination and is currently the youth ambassador for Malaria, No More UK, through which he speaks and engages at high-level platforms to mobilize resources to end malaria. And then he helped establish the Commonwealth Youth Health Network. So right now, the next voice you'll be hearing is that of Dr. Elvis Eze, who will be speaking on this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isaac, and thank you so much to everyone who has been able to join us here. Thank you to the leaders and people who have spoken before me. I'll just go straight to the point on why we're here, which is to talk about how young people can advocate for malaria and universal health coverage. I do know that young people have so far been engaged in different ways, whether that be trade, health. If you look at the panelists for this session, you would understand that a lot of young people are quite engaged towards ending malaria. Well, the question I hope we would answer as part of this discussion is, what would it take for young people to not only dream of a malaria-free world, but to see a path, a shared path towards zero malaria in Africa? For me, and to keep it straightforward, I try to think about the root causes or the problems that we face with malaria in Africa. The first one for me is apathy and disinterest. As a newly minted medical doctor in Nigeria, I do remember being in the emergency room and realizing that, oh, malaria is actually very serious, because when everyone you see around you growing up don't really take it as serious as when they have mild cases of malaria, they just go in there, pop the medication, probably the person gets well, and that is all done. But then when you see in the hospital people coming down with, especially women and children, as has been mentioned, coming down with bigger problems, serious cases, then you know that it's actually serious, it can kill. So the first problem for me is apathy. The second one is poverty. That needs no mention. Malaria is a disease of poverty. Countries and places which have poverty are known to have more malaria cases and more malaria deaths. And finally is weaker health systems. So back to our question, which is how do we advocate for malaria and UHC? I'm quite happy that we're just not talking about malaria only, but we're talking about UHC, universal health coverage, as part of that. So I think that is very important. And if we can tackle these three things as part of our advocacy, I do think we're going to make progress. So apathy and disinterest, poverty, and the weaker health systems that we know are rampant across Africa. And looking at these things, they give us the data that we know that every 2 minutes a child dies from malaria. And the data that we've just heard about, that 94% of death from malaria, 93% of cases are in sub-Saharan Africa. So that brings me to the final part of my speech this morning or afternoon, wherever you are, which is what can we do? What are a few points that we can do to make sure that we are making progress towards zero malaria? First for me is ensuring that through this consultation, that we are sure that we make sure that we profile metrics, so measurements for how to discourage youth apathy, or how to encourage young people to be interested or more interested in the fight against malaria. The second one is to make concrete plans for engaging national malaria control programs. We have them in many African countries who are endemic of malaria. So we need to engage these bodies to ensure that we're not just working in silos, but working with data-driven approach. And finally, it is how do we ensure accountability to the shared goal of zero malaria, especially in the time of COVID-19, because as we do know, all eyes, all finances are going towards COVID, and we still have the other diseases that continue to cripple our nations. So for me, we just have to look at those things, the metrics connecting to NMCP and ensuring accountability. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis, for that very lovely remark. I really, really learned a lot. Thank you for raising the aspect of data-driven advocacy, how we need facts, to be able to really encounter this problem, and how we need to be accountable to be able to overcome malaria in Africa. And thank you very much for the wonderful work that you have been doing in this subject area. Yeah, so it's just to remind everyone here that if we need to drop our questions, please, you can kindly just drop them on the chat box. We'll be responding to them, and we'll also be taking the questions at the end of this session when all the speakers are done speaking. And it's really nice that you can always just drop them as the questions really come, so that we can really just be able to collate them and move on with that. So next is Vivian Joseph. Vivian Joseph is a young and energetic Tanzanian lady. She is a medical student at Lugalo Military Medical School. She works with the Launchpad Tanzania as an intern in planning and execution and a team lead to a non-profit organization called Rebooted Africa, as well as a tourism company called iTraveler. So occasionally she volunteers with the Youth of United Nations Association as a volunteer. She is also a representative of the UNICEF Tanzania COVID-19 Champions Young Leaders and a certified of the Model African Union Initiative. On the they will be inviting Vivian.
Thank you, Alec, and everyone that has spoken. My side, as we try to engage youth into reaching out, eliminating malaria, as well as the universal health coverage at large, I'll talk about why should we involve the youth in tackling this issue, and so as we can combat fully malaria as a disease. My reasons as why should the youth be involved in such movements is to avoid the perpetuating and reinforcing of the marginalization of young people. In years back, young people were a bit behind into implementing issues and activities that were going on for the nations and Africa at large. And I think bringing in youth into such activities, into such movements, helps to move further, as it says, like, we should not leave anyone behind, especially the youth with so much energy and power. Also, my other reason why we should involve the youth into implementing this, into such activities, into such movements, is to confront the society's stigmatization of young people, that young people are deviant, young people and couple are not capable, young people are criminals, to remove that stigmatization and to bring a new view and opinion on youth, that they're capable, that they can stand clean, they can focus on the positive side of youth. And also to maximize a positive impact, because there are about 60% of young people under the age of 25 in Africa, by the statistics in 2019. So we can figure out the percentage of young people is in a large numbers. So involving young people maximizes the positive impact to whatsoever role that is made for the youth in ALMA, as we speak specifically to eliminate malaria, but also to promote an intergenerational transfer of knowledge and positive cultural values. This helps to transfer the knowledge from the elder. For example, there are traditional ways to that we can combat malaria. So it can come from the elderly and transfer to the youth, and it is going to be easily implemented and easily taken to action. Also, to invest in young people has so many benefits, since we youth are an exceptional human resource. We have we're energetic, we're innovative, we have courage, we can stand for what we want. So I believe we have all the reasons to involve youth in such activities. Well, I can also give an example. I read one of the articles from the World Health Organization. It says in front of the WHO headquarters in Geneva, there's a statue of a young child holding an end of a stick, leading a blind man. This portrays that a young person can also help the past generations to tackle the problems as we face ahead. So involving youth in such can help to can help positively and energetically to eliminate malaria. But also, we live in an instant communication and convergent media, and can contribute to better advocacy and control to prevent malaria. We know that most of our youth are more into technology and digitalization. It is easy for them to share knowledge, share messages concerning this disease, and it can help people to know how they can control the infections, how they can prevent themselves, and how they can use ways that they can eliminate this disease. But also, this generation can conceive, develop, and produce programs. For example, I can give an example of a young person from Tanzania. His name is Shilton Ulomi, currently developing a health insurance software. This is going to help tackle problem in insurance, not only in our country, but involving them in such. There are all sorts of reasons that can encourage youth to be involved. And till 2018, there have been 228 million cases. So I believe bringing youth together to tackle these problems will help to reduce such cases. And by 2030, malaria will be history. I believe so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivian, for such a very remarkable highlight of this event, and for you talking about the marginalization of youth and how involving youth would help to maximize the positive impact. The story you shared about the WHO headquarters, in Geneva is just really wonderful and really illustrates the point very well. So next on the agenda is Mr. Brian Gita. And I would be, he invented Matibabu, is a medical non-invasive device that detects malaria in 2 minutes. Is the 2018 award recipient from the Academy of, from award recipient from the Royal Academy of Engineering by shining a red beam of light on the patient's finger. So Mr. Brian Gita is from Uganda, so we really love to hear you speak.
Thank you very much, Isaac, and thank you everyone for having me here today, and all protocol observed. So I would like to give Matibabu as a case study of how we could engage youth. As we all know, every year, tens of millions of people in Africa get infected with malaria. Even in our company, Matibabu, all of us have been infected by malaria. Because we have all been infected with malaria, we know firsthand how difficult it can be to diagnose. Even in equipped clinics, it can take up to 30 minutes. That's from the time a blood sample is acquired until conclusive results can be obtained with a microscope. And equipped clinics with experienced health professionals do not exist in many poor regions of Africa. In most cases, death by malaria is caused due to late diagnosis. This presents an opportunity for us as youth to engage in the advocacy of universal health coverage and innovative solutions to support our communities in such challenges or such stresses like malaria. At Matibabu, we then set out to find a better way of closing the gap between the communities and their rightful access to healthcare, and we did. We did this by developing a reusable point of care diagnostic kit that reduces the time of diagnosis from 30 to 2 minutes. There is also a social health aspect to this. This device incorporates machine learning. The identified cases can automatically be fed into a dashboard to produce aggregated data that can show in almost real time the geographical distribution and evolution of the cases. This supports the vector control programs and ministries of health to better plan the interventions to eradicate malaria. Interventions that are data-driven, but also interventions that are cost-effective. As I close, I want to share a story that shows that the question is not only technological, but also cultural. We as youth have a role to play in the communities towards the eradication of malaria. We have to think big, we have to start now. And youth should also have this kind of entrepreneurial mindset, which pushes them to seek and create solutions other than just waiting for the other players to have an effort in their education. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for that really, really punchy remark. First, I really love the fact that we shouldn't just really be looking for an external savior to come and solve our issues. We need to take action ourselves by evolving and ensuring that we utilize and create these products and these services, which could be, and thank you for your great work that you do at Matibabo. It's really nice for young people to embrace entrepreneurial mindset. So I'll be moving over to Ms. Letabo Sithole. She's from South Africa. She's the chairperson of the AFCTA Youth Forum Advisory Board and the founding director of Rengo Group, which is a collection of companies that offer expertise on industrial development, management, and strategy, as well as sustainable and environmental friendly solutions to the manufacturing of construction materials on the African continent. In addition to this, she offers SHEQ management and compliance, as well as social facilitation and rural development consultancy through accounting, TODI, training and consultancy. And she has a master's in international business law from Queen's Mary University of London. Please let's welcome Letabo. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, the leadership at ALMA, youth leaders and participants. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much to the team at ALMA for inviting me today to share some insights on the importance of engaging the youth in advocacy and advocating for the ALMA 2030 goal to eliminate malaria. As mentioned in my introduction, I am a representative of the AFCFTA Youth Forum. We are a youth-centered, youth-led organization that seeks to put the youth at the forefront of decision-making. I know the principal theme of this session is really to delve into what the youth can or should do to advocate for malaria and universal health coverage. However, before I get into a very short summary of action points for the youth, I'd like to highlight and acknowledge that in order for effective and meaningful youth engagements and advocacy to happen, ALMA, governments, and other leaders across all sectors of society have a very important role to play in creating an enabling environment for youth advocacy. And I know that one of the principal objectives of this consultation are to work towards the development of an ALMA youth strategy and also an ALMA youth council or advisory board. And so I also think it's important to mention that in order for any organization really to effectively implement a youth strategy, there needs to be a very clear definition and understanding of what youth engagement means for the organization, as well as the extent to which the organization intends to engage the youth. You know, is it an organization that is adult-led and has very passive involvement from the youth? Is it an organization that is adult-led and gives some of the youth token roles? Is it an organization that is adult-led and considers some youth interests? Is it an organization that is adult-led and consults the youth? Or is it an organization that aims to achieve equal and mutual intergenerational leadership and partnership? Now, in a continent with a median range, a median age group of 19.5, I would say that it goes without saying that equal intergenerational partnership and leadership opportunities is very important for the achievement of the ALMA goals, as well as for the attainment of both sustainable and equitable health systems on the African continent. We need the youth to have influence over the development and the implementation of policies, programs, and projects in the area. We also need to allow the youth to catalyze change in existing policies and practices. by doing so, we really change the prevailing power structure that seeks to prevent the youth from identifying as experts in certain fields of socioeconomic policies and health policies too. This enabling environment really will support and encourage the youth to carry out the action points that I have, in the interest of time, summarized into 3 key points. The first being the youth as educators. Now, over the years, studies have shown that the youth are very, very, very enthusiastic sharers of new gained knowledge and insights, whether it be with their peers, their families, their communities, or society at large, and even more so in the digital age. This really comes to say that the youth is well placed to educate, inform, and create awareness on the causes, the treatments, and the long-term prevention of malaria and other neglected tropical diseases. The second being the youth as advocates for public health reform, as well as access to basic needs. The youth can play a critical role in holding governments accountable for ensuring that everyone has access to care, ensuring that governments are protecting funding for core public health programs and services, and that governments are eliminating health disparities, especially in deep rural areas and also remote areas where there is no access to clinics or hospitals. This can be done both individually and collectively. The youth can volunteer in or join in youth advocacy groups. The third point, which I also think is very important, is partnerships between youth leaders in both the public and the private sectors. I think one of the main issues on the African continent is that we are a continent of policy formulators and not necessarily policy implementers, and which is why we have some of the world's most amazing policies, but in terms of implementation, we continue to fail. Now, this public-private partnerships between young leaders, local communities, businesses, and other stakeholders has the ability to bridge this gap by supporting the governments and other development organizations or health organizations such as ALMA with the resources, the expertise, and the data to reform and implement public health policies as well. This point also feeds in very, very well into the core objectives of the AFCFTA Youth Forum. And although we do not currently have any programs that seek to facilitate universal healthcare, we do aim to establish partnerships with other youth-led and youth-centered organizations to link up and join and create partnerships with leaders in business and also decision makers in public policy. And lastly, I do want to mention and also reiterate that I do not think the readiness of the youth to become change agents is something that people should be questioning anymore. I think time and time again, we have shown our dedication and our interest to take up seats at the table. And not only just a seat, but seats where we will be allowed to be equals and leaders who are respected and heard. The big question really is, what are the policymakers doing, or rather, how can policy formulators, decision makers, governments and leaders across all sectors ensure that they continue to support both financially and technically and encourage the youth from diverse cultural, socio-economic and academic backgrounds at especially grassroots levels to continue actively and meaningfully advocating for malaria and universal health coverage. I don't have the time to delve into that today, but I do think the speakers in the upcoming session will get into how leaders, governments, and organizations can engage the youth in a way that is active and both meaningful. And I just want us all to remember today, as young people, as young leaders, that zero malaria starts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I really love the fact that you ended on a very positive note of a zero malaria starts with us. Thank you so much to all our speakers today, Vivian Joseph, Mr. Brankita, Dr. Helvis Eze, Ms. Letabo Sito. You really did a fantastic job in telling us how youth can be educators, advisory, partnerships, in just moving the solution forward. And really, there's no excuse. Youth can really do the job and can do well on the job. So right now, we'll be taking our questions. And the first question will be going to Dr. Helvis Eze. The question is from Tabani. The question reads, we as the African youth, what can we do to make sure that our health system is and it's not dependent on political climate, of our various states and countries. Please, yeah.
Thank you, Sabani, for the question on youth role in ensuring that the health system is revitalized and not dependent on the political climate. The truth is, individual and communal activism works. And why I say that it works is that no matter what we do, the political climate is actually a necessary part of ensuring like a holistic health system. And the only way around that, or one of the biggest way around that, would be first to make sure that malaria and health system strengthening is important to us at the community level, at our youth forums, at our local governments, at our county level. If a politician or someone in a leadership position, whether that person be young or older, knows that this is important for my constituents, I do believe that they would put in a lot more, they would invest more in terms of time and finances to ensure that the health systems are strengthened. And that can really be a vote winner. So for me, it is community and individual activism to say, oh, health system strengthening is important to us. That is one. Two would be innovations like what Matibabu is doing. With that, you know that you're bringing something to the table, and then someone can meet you halfway to say, okay, we have this testing. Can we meet these people halfway to say, let's use this type of testing because it ensures a holistic approach. When you do the testing, it goes up directly, it is digitized quickly. So that is something else where you bring in some form of expertise. But most importantly for me is making sure that at our communal and individual level, health system strengthening is important. That way, the political climate would have to bend to what the rest of us, young people and constituents, want, because without that, you won't win the votes. So for me, that's the way I tend to see it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that well-detailed and explained answer, Dr. Helvis. Just quickly before we leave, I would just like to take one more question, and the question is to Letabo on how we can really strategies to meaningfully engage young people. I think that is it, not just tokenization of young people, and strategies to meaningfully engage young people in advocating for zero malaria and to ensure that there's universal health coverage. Just let's quickly take that.
Okay, I will just mention three of the most easiest ways to engage young people. And the first one I would say is what Alma is working towards, which is an amazing initiative, is working towards a youth strategy and also a youth advisory council. Secondly is actually appointing youth and young leaders and young experts into both executive and board roles within the organizations. And lastly would be partnering with other youth-led organizations that have the same goals, whether it be through advisory or funding. I do think that our youth are trying to do a lot. We just need a lot more mentorship, a lot more support, and a lot more funding in order to carry out and fulfill our projects and our goals. So yeah, I would say those are the 3 best ways to start.
Okay, that's really great. Thank you for giving us the concrete examples to add to your message. So right now we will be taking, please, if you have questions about towards the ending of this call, we'll be having the ALMA team answer your questions and really provide robust feedback on, and clarification on things that you really need. Yeah, so right now we'll be taking videos from young leaders showing how they are being engaged or how they are advocating for zero malaria levels in Africa and also universal health coverage. And then we'll begin the next session. So I'm Dr. Isaac Olufadowa. I'm the Managing Ambassador for One Young World Africa Middle East region, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Malaria Health Initiative. It's really wonderful having such lovely speakers, and thank you all for your time.
We believe that malaria must die in the world. We believe that malaria must die in Africa.
I also advocate for health systems strengthening, as I believe in strong health systems as the way to achieve universal health coverage. That is healthcare for all.
And I believe with the proper utilization of artificial intelligence and technology, certain gaps can be closed and the world can be a better place.
I advocate to people in my community to go for proper checkup, and ever since then, I noticed that I fall in love with advocacy.
Impliquer dans la lutte contre le paludisme est un devoir pour chaque jeune du continent et je suis heureuse d'en faire partie, surtout à cause du fardeau de cette maladie tuant plus de 400 000 personnes dans le monde, principalement en Afrique.
As a young person, I think it's my responsibility to contribute to this fight.
My role as a malaria champion is to engage stakeholders to increase malaria funding. We are the generation that can end malaria, but we cannot do it alone. That is why I am calling for every African government to join hands and resources to eradicate this disease once and for all. Zero malaria starts with me.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Indeed, zero malaria starts with us. I'd like to thank you, Isaac, for moderating the previous session. Thank you to the previous speakers. And I'd also like to acknowledge the role of His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta in spearheading this important campaign, as well as the role of the AU commissioners and the ALMA Secretariat, and also all the young people who are here on this call today and will be engaging with this in the future. Welcome to session 2. My name is Tikwiza Sulubonde, and I will be moderating this session. This session is on action-oriented approaches in mainstreaming youth as advocates for malaria and universal health care. This session will take the form of slides and a presentation. So we have speakers, and the speakers will be taking us through their main points in the form of the slide. The first speaker who I'd like to invite, his name is Mr. Farhan Yusuf. Farhan is a pharmacist by profession and he's a youth advocate from Tanzania. He is also a youth leader at Youth Leaders for Health and working again as a pharmacist in health supply chain. So I'd like to thank you, Farhan, and give the floor to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. Hey everyone, Farhan here. So jumping right into this session is about action-oriented approaches in mainstreaming youth as advocates for malaria and universal health coverage. And I'm glad to get this opportunity to talk about an amazing program that I'm currently a part of that's called the Youth Leaders for Health program. So a bit of an introduction. Youth Leaders for Health is a platform that facilitates and connects 25 youth leaders from 3 African countries, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Tanzania. These youth leaders, were selected based on their passion about health and healthcare systems to advocate for policy change at key regional and global advocacy moments, and with the aim to influence decision makers during a range of pivotal moments towards ending the malaria epidemic, achieving universal health coverage, and creating lasting impact Apologies for that slight disturbance. These are the challenges of working virtually. So I think Letabo brought up some points earlier that, you know, youth are ready, youth are very willing to engage. However, what they require is mentorship, they require technical support, and they require some sort of financial support as well. And that's exactly what this program provides. We, as youth leaders, we have been trained, our capacity has been built in advocacy. We are also being mentored by international organizations, but at the same time, a local host organization as well. In Tanzania, we work with Health Promotion Tanzania. That's a very active CSO doing different activities in the country, and it provides us with the national partnership, with the required necessary partnerships, both nationally and internationally as well. Interestingly, the theme for the International Youth Day this year was, you know, engaging youth at all levels. And that is really the focus of this particular program. How do we as youth engage at the grassroots level, at the national level, and at the international level as well? One important thing, because as I share this experience and, you know, keeping in mind everything that's happening with COVID-19 right now, we had to change certain strategies as youth advocates, because initially the idea was for us to do more grassroots activities. But as we know, COVID-19 has led to some challenges as far as physical interaction is concerned, keeping in mind the various precautions that we need to take. But what we have realized is that there's still a lot of space and opportunity for youth leaders and youth advocates to work in the virtual space, which is what we have been doing quite a lot, especially during this time of the COVID. And for us, we came up with a hashtag. That's the hashtag for our program. I hope people have engaged with it on social media. If they haven't, I would request them to do so. And that hashtag is called The Beat Continues. And the reason it's been put that way is because even though right now we are caught up with COVID, we have COVID on our mind, but let's make sure that the beat continues, especially when it comes to killer diseases like malaria, which is taking a lot of lives in Africa, and for health systems reformation, health system strengthening, and universal health coverage. I have put down our handles as well for people to check. I think another thing that I would like to talk about, and if we can move to the next slide, please, is the fact that I think what is really important when it comes to being action oriented, as the theme of this particular panel says, youth need to really have in mind that action can be in various different forms, and there are numerous roles that they can play within their environment. And these are some of those roles that I would like to talk about that we're currently practicing within this program. I think first and foremost, youths can play the role of educators and people who provide information, who provide knowledge. And this is important because many of the youth are at the grassroots level. They communicate with their communities, they understand them, and they know exactly what language to speak in, what modality to speak in. So youth need to understand their role as educators. We need to become advocates and storytellers. So how do we advocate? How do we give our voice to the issues that matter most to us, especially issues such as health and malaria? And how do we tell the required stories? We've heard some of those stories from previous speakers of really youth doing some amazing work within their spaces, but how do we get those voices out? Youth can be amazing community and resource mobilizers, bringing together people, bringing together communities, and also catalyzing that process of resource mobilization. There's a big role that youth can play as scientists and researchers, because we know, we talk about data, we talk about evidence-based approaches. So youth can really play a big role in that as scientists and researchers. Youth can be innovators. Again, we've seen examples of that in our panel today itself. And it's really upon us to think about new ways of doing things, and remembering that innovation is not just about digital, it's also about how can we do things in a new and better way. Our youth are amazing at networking, and really, this consultation, I feel, is also one of those examples of how youth from different countries in Africa have come together to push forward this movement. And lastly, youth need to lead in all these different areas, and they need to, continue leading. Another hashtag that we came up with is Youth Leaders for Change, and please, everyone should engage with that as well. Happy to take questions later on. That's it from me.
Thank you so much, Farhan, and thank you for your valuable contributions. I've taken the point that youth has various roles that they can play at various levels, grassroots, national and international. And it's very important that we realize that we can engage, and there are many ways for us to engage. Next, we have Ms. Helena Galifua from Namibia. She serves as an ambassador of the Break Free campaign under the Office of the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia. Helena is also a representative of the Southern Africa Development Community Youth Forum. That's the SADC Youth Forum. Thank you, Helena. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and I'm really honored and excited to be part of this discussion. And I think I'd just like to highlight some of the points that I feel that young people need to be playing. That is, of course, on how to facilitate malaria as youth Amhs. And some of the key asks that I have is, of course, using social media as a tool for young people to raise awareness in ending malaria as part of influencing positive change. As we know that young people we communicate on the social media so often, and we have seen that especially now with the fight of COVID, how effective social media has been. So I think it's very important and very prompt that as young people we use this platform, as this is the platform where many young people use to engage. Also proposing a ALMA Youth Army Advisory Council to influence, that is, policy and decision-making processes on issues related to malaria and better health access together with African leaders. And for me, I passionately believe that young people need to be involved, that is, when it comes to decision-making. Also, I have here thinking is that African leaders need to benchmark on other countries to see the success dealing in ending malaria. And this is important to see that what have other countries done? How have other countries managed to fight? How have they won this fight? We've seen countries, for example, like Namibia, that is one of the countries where the malaria has really, the rate has dropped. And I think that other countries can, of course, also learn from leaders like our leaders or many other countries where the numbers have dropped, to learn and to see what it is that they did that they can possibly also implement in their countries. Our leaders and government must make it a responsibility to make sure that every household in malaria-prone areas have access to malaria preventive tools such as mosquito nets. I think this is highly important. This is a necessity, especially if the area is a prone area of malaria. I think that government needs to tap into the resources that they have to make sure that each household has that is preventive tools to fight malaria. And of course, looking that young people should be included in every aspect that involves conversation around eradicating malaria, which I think is very important because the young people are the custodians and they are the ones that we are entrusting with the fight against malaria. So I think it's very important that we include young people in these conversations. Also here having that is, I think we can go to the third slide, which is also voices from young people. If we can go to the third slide, okay. So with here is malaria awareness campaigns must be spread across Africa in different countries, and it has to be in indigenous languages. Now here is not only for the message to be in a different language in each country, also that the campaigns that are laid out or that are spread out across Africa needs to touch on the cultural and the tradition basis of those countries, to custom make each campaign for each country based on the culture and customs that the country has, so that the people on the grassroots can understand. We also need to look at young people should also include media, tradition media in a campaign. And this is very, very important because if you look at the gap that we are trying, the intergenerational gap that we are trying now, most of our elderly people still believe in the traditional media. And of course, we are still looking into how we can learn and how we can teach our elders to tap into the new digital world. So I think it's also very important that we bring along the traditional media in the campaigns to make sure that we are covering everybody that needs to hear the message. Young people should influence policy implementation, response to social youth, social health related issues such as malaria in order to strengthen the continental plan for ending malaria 2020. Improve health infrastructure, especially in rural areas. And I think this is, especially for our leaders, for our government, it's very, very important, because when we talk about malaria, we're tapping into especially poverty, and we need to make sure that our health infrastructures are improved, especially in the rural areas. Also, humanitarian spirit to be adopted by the youth, and of course, in order for them to be influencers, positive change related in health activities, this is in their societies. I think this is very, very important for young people to build or to have a spirit of humanitarian. And this is to help out, run out campaigns, voluntary basis, to ensure themselves that they want to be the voice, whether it's they are being paid for it or they're not being paid for it, but they are doing it for a better cause. And of course, young people must play a role in educating elders on the importance of accessing modern health facilities. This is very, very important, especially when it comes to our elders, because in so many areas around Africa, and I know in Namibia specifically, that our elders are very more trusting when it comes to the old way of medications, and very not very forthcoming when it comes to modern health facilities. So I think it's a very important role that young people need to play. And of course, also young people must be able to decentralize information that is made available through new media. So decentralizing information, we need to look at, we are in the 21st century, and we have been fighting this cause for centuries and centuries now. So we need to look at where did we start and where were we in the past and where we are today, and be able to put that information together, and of course, to make sure that it's accessible to everybody. And I think also young people need to pin down what are the learning curves and where did we go wrong and where can we, of course, improve. Decisions and actions should be based on accurate and real-time data. And this is also very, very important, because if we are fighting, if we are taking on this fight and we want to eradicate that is malaria, and we want to eliminate it, we need to be prompt with our data. We need to know that the numbers of people that we are working with right now that have malaria are actually the number of people. And I think that this is something very, very important. And if fully equipped, I am very confident that our young people will be able to take on this task. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. Thank you for your valuable contributions as well. And I think it's very important, actually, that you raise the fact that when we amplify the voices of young people, we're amplifying them in a context-specific manner, in a way that speaks to the different contexts and cultural practices in different countries. It's important. And I also love that you mentioned that although we are inviting young people to take up this platform, we also need to engage and bridge the gap between the young and the old. So that's very valuable. And before I move on to the next speaker, I'd also like to encourage you. We are seeing there's a lot of activity going on in the chat that you're engaging with us. We really welcome that. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the session. But while you're at it, please feel free to engage with us through the survey that's in the chat box. We'll be answering questions at the end, but for now you can answer the question, or at least engage with us through the survey. So next we have Ms. Ruth Ogola from Kenya. Ruth is a country lead of the East African Community Ambassadors Platform, and she's professionally a practicing advocate of the High Court of Kenya. Ruth specializes in litigation, conveyancing, commercial and alternative dispute resolution. Thank you, Ruth. The floor is yours. Ruth, we are struggling to hear you, but the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you so much. Apologies, a few issues here and there. Anyway, to follow the discussion throughout on the various matters that have been raised concerning youth participation, involvement in matters malaria, and matters universal health coverage. I am honored today to be part of this great session by ALMA and to speak on behalf of the East Africa Youth Ambassadors Platform. So my presentation today is going to be based on four key areas. The first area is going to be basically why the youth should be involved in matters to deal with malaria and the universal health coverage is to be taken. What should be done in terms of participating in malaria and universal health coverage. Also, I'll be looking at the lessons that we can learn from the East Africa Youth Ambassadors Platform, which has been seen over the years, the platform where youths are actively involved to get also actively to involve matters that are really pertinent to them. And then lastly, I'm going to look at what can be done to gather support from a regional perspective, the regional economic perspective. So let us start. Why should youths be involved? It has already been stated by several speakers that have talked that the youth need to be involved because, of course, we are the leaders of today as much as we are the leaders of tomorrow. But I'll look at it from a point of or rather the laws or the legal perspective, because I'm an advocate, I guess. The youth need also to be involved because even the laws that we have support the involvement in matters to deal with health, such as what we are dealing with right now. I'll say if you have a look at the treaty for the establishment of the East Africa region, and also if you have a look at the EAC youth policy, they both advocate, they actually both advocate for youth participation in the region in terms of matters to deal with policies and strategies actively. Specifically, I would like to point out Article 120C of the EAC Treaty, which is specific to that aspect of youth involvement. I think it specifies that youth involvement is rather very important and is one that cannot be ignored because, as we can see, we are the leaders of today and we are the leaders of tomorrow. And certainly we have the capacity, we have the mindset. We actually are very innovative if granted the opportunity also to ensure that various agendas are being spearheaded. And in this case, we are talking about malaria and universal health coverage. So I'd like to proceed to the second point, which are the approaches to be taken. What approaches can we take to ensure that the youth participate actively to the agenda that His Excellency, my President, Uhuru Kenyatta advocates for, the Malaria Youth Army in terms of youth participation. And the first approach that I would like to state is development of a structure of youth participation in both the regional and the national level. Why am I saying it is important for us to have this development structure? It is fine. I've had so many speakers stating here that youth are being involved, but in their individual capacities, as in entrepreneurs, like what the previous speaker talked about, and also as organizations that they have personally initiated, like what I've had Faham stating, what I've had Brian stating today. But my presentation will be based on that we need to get leverage from the governments that we are in. I am well aware that ALMA constitutes of 40 states, partner states. So if we can get these leverages from all the country, a structure that is created specifically as the Malaria Youth Army that advocates for youth involvement in malaria and universal health coverage, that is created specifically maybe from an ALMA level or from the government level. At regional and national level, regional level can be stated as maybe the one to be like the check for the national level to guide them, maybe to be like some sort of guidance procedure for the national level. But on a national level, because we want to actually get the maximum impact that we can get. So the second approach that I'm advocating for is the development and the passing of policies and regulations. Yes, we want youth to be involved. We have stated, our governments have stated the same. ALMA stated the same. But do we have the necessary laws to help youth actually be involved? Are there laws that are supporting the same? And if they are there, how far are we with them in terms of implementation? Because I've seen there might be some laws like the way we have for the EAC Treaty for youth involvement, but the implementation is actually the key here. So I think we need to really look at the implementation level. And then thirdly, I'll say we appoint youth from partner states to form part of the Malaria Youth Army at a regional level. This is because I see it like something that needs to be very impactful. If we need an army, then we need all countries to be represented.
Important, si l'on parle de créer une armée de lutte
That
contre le
are
paludisme,
actually
chaque
from,
pays doit le faire.
the entire ALMA level. So that means that we can create something that, for instance, we
quelque chose qui.
Excuse me, I think there's someone else who's speaking, so maybe I can be guided by that, Miss Moderator.
Quelqu'un d'autre est en train de
for the interruption, Ruth, we've got translator who's also translating, so the interruption is from the translation, but I'm sure that'll be addressed shortly. Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you so much. If I may proceed. Like I was stating that we need to appoint youth, specific youth in each country. My proposal is in the sense that if we have people who are known to be in that specific docket of advocating, or rather to be leaders of the Youth Malaria Army, it will be easier for them to be accountable. It will be easier for them also to work, considering they know that they have the government support, the organization support, and the youth will know how exactly to interact with these organizations, so that, or rather these leaders, so that their organization can also be featured, or rather their intentions can also be heard in terms of how they will share to end the malaria agenda. Also, I'm looking at another approach will be the approach of creating a fund for the Malaria Youth Army. If you're going with an army, it is very good to say that right now, so far, much has been done, like in Kenya, in terms of having strategies and wanting to involve the youth. But the issue comes in terms of funding. If you look at Kenya, as currently, we have been getting our funding mainly from, we are getting our funding from a single source, or rather, we are getting it World Bank. To some extent, it does help us in terms of, and there's also WHO which help us, and of course the government itself uses its own funders, but the biggest funder that we have in Kenya right now for the malaria control program is the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. We also have others that come in handy, but it was estimated by the Rollback Malaria that we actually need US dollars 427 million for us in Kenya to be able at least to fight the malaria. So my thinking is we already have an issue in terms of funding on this project. So it will be good for us to at least create a fund and allow the youths to come up with ideas of how to raise funds, and also the government to help in reaching out in terms of getting the necessary funds to at least kickstart the Malaria Youth Army. Also, the next approach I'm looking at is the creation of a regional center of innovation research at ALMA headquarters that will receive articles, innovation proposal, and application on health matters from youths in the region for publishing and support. If we grant this opportunity to our youth, then essentially we are saying, here we are, we have heard your cries, we want you to be part of the malaria and universal health coverage, and this is exactly how we want you to be part of. Here are the funds to kickstart the project that you might have, the ideas that you might have, but at the same time, we're actually saying we have a center that can be used specifically to receive the kind of maybe innovation ideas that you have, the proposal to end malaria and also to foster universal health. So at least that way, if you have a center, it will be aware, like it will be some sort of a great platform for all of us to at least achieve what we need, like a research and innovation hub in terms of fighting or rather ending malaria in Africa. Then I'm also looking at another approach that we can take. We can assign regional leaders to actually govern the army. Like I've stated, I'm looking at this from an angle whereby if you're having a national level, we need a regional level. The regional level can be at ALMA. maybe can be considered that ALMA has this specific department, because I know they have the advisory council. So when they have that one, so probably they can give us leaders now to govern these youth leaders that would have been selected or rather appointed by specific governments that are part of ALMA now to spearhead the functions and rather the roles of ending malaria and supporting training these youth. Appointing them is not enough. You might appoint them, but they might not really know what to do. We are saying that youths maybe are no longer involved, or rather they don't want to be involved in malaria, but I think that is a very wrong perception. Youths are always willing to be involved in all types of things. The issue should be, how should they be involved, or rather, how do you want to assimilate youths in terms of this institution, in terms of governments, in terms of all these ideas that we have, so that they can actively take part. So probably if we train them as we have the structure and the bodies and the fund, it will be a way to at least head up to the right path in terms of youth participation. Then I'm looking at providing an online platform for youth in the region to engage. We already know that there are several platforms that we have, and these platforms are for youth-led organization. Even for ALMA, I know that we already have a platform. They have the social media pages, the Twitter and Facebook for engagement. But now when we are talking about the youth army, maybe we should create a specific platform, maybe under the already existing platform, to enable youth to engage, then hold sessions continuously, or rather from time to time, to enable youth to actually contribute positively towards the agenda to end malaria and to promote universal health coverage. If you can kindly assist me to move to the next slide now, we should look at, I'd like to look at the lessons from the East Africa Youth Ambassadors platform that I believe will be really helpful to ALMA in terms of youth involvement in terms of the youth malaria army that it seeks to have. Next slide, please. On the lessons on the lessons from the East Africa platform. As a member of the East Africa platform, there's one major thing that I noticed that the East Africa Youth Ambassadors platform has that ALMA can benefit from, and that is a clear vision and mission and the resilient nature to succeed in terms of absorbing the youth. And then the second thing is the development of a well-thought leadership structure to spearhead ALMA's agenda on youth involvement in the region. And then the next thing will be to advocate for the adoption of the regional national laws and regulations to govern the Malaria Youth Army. And then probably to solicit for funds for malaria youth activities, which I've already talked about. And then now looking at the creation of a balanced composition of Malaria Youth Army. Now, if I'd like to emphasize a bit on what I've just stated in terms of the Malaria Youth Army and how I see it ideally to having a very good impact, or rather the required impact in terms of how it's set out in youth participation and youth involvement in ending malaria and the universal health coverage. If we are selecting the leaders, the youth leaders, to be part of the army so that they can at least take up from the rest of everyone else, then we need to think of a scenario like for the East Africa Youth Ambassadors platform. What happens with the East Africa Youth Ambassadors platform? They held an annual debate competition whereby people who were in the East Africa region applied, the youths, and then after the applications, they selected top 6 participants who they later participated in a debate competition and became the members. So maybe ALMA can also adopt that strategy in terms of selecting the army. And then when you look at the East Africa Youth Ambassador platform, there are leaders that we have from a regional level. That's why I was also soliciting for the same. And then we, as the East Africa Youth Ambassadors platform, we have been given a platform where we come up with our own ideas as youths, and then we solicit for fundings as youth. Also, even though most of the time you're also helped by the Secretariat, which and the Department of Political Affairs, which we are under in terms of funding, and then now we kickstart the entire agenda. So maybe ALMA can take up the same strategy and ensuring that we have a balanced structure, or rather a balanced group of youth from all over, spearhead the agenda. And then lastly, I've been told that my time is up. Apologies for that. Allow me to finish with the last point. I'm thinking we can learn from ESC Youth Ambassador level. I think there's a linkage between the national, we need to create a linkage between the National Malaria Army and the End Malaria Council that we already have at a country level. So I think that will be really good for all of us, because the youth army cannot work alone without the guidance from maybe, I'm thinking the councils that already exist in terms of the campaign to end malaria. So if we look at that, I think generally we as youth will be better placed. So I really do hope that we'll be granted this opportunity as youth to participate in the greater campaign individually, yes, as has been already been stated, and also from a certain level of appointment, which will grant us support, leverage, that will also place us directly at positions whereby we can impact positively on other youths in the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your contribution, Ruth. This is what happens when we're passionate about this area. So apologies for the slight delay in time. We're going to move on to the next speaker, who is Mr. Richard Dzikunu. Richard is an advocate for tech, a digital health advocate, and he is with Youth Expert Tech for Health. Richard, please take the floor.
Yep, thank you very much for having me. And the previous speaker definitely did take a lot of time, but significantly addressed a lot of the point that I also wanted to raise. So quickly, for me, I would say, first of all, I am very happy to see that young people are meaningfully being engaged in this process. Because a lot of times, before young people are invited to the table, we are actually told what to say and what not to say. And that already takes the conversation from young people. But the process leading to this consultation has truly been meaningful. And having all of the other young speakers expressing their work and what they have done in a passionate and you know, in a committed way shows that there is clear leadership. And for me, this is the first step that we need as ALMA to move forward. This is not the first time youth initiatives come up or we say we want to engage young people. But we've begun on a very good note where we are seeing that young people are actively participating. I would just touch on one thing, that we should invest in youth-led organizations and youth-led accountability mechanisms. Now, a few of us here are experts in our field. We've been able to achieve different heights because we received some form of capacity building at some point as young people. And that is why we are here today and we are able to contribute to this process. But we are just a handful. To be able to reach out to the larger group of young people across all of the continent, then we need to invest in youth-led organizations. Youth-led organizations that are at the forefront and at the community level. And that is a practical step. For me, I would say young people have proven that they can deliver on the African continent. When it comes to issues of advocating for sexual reproductive health and rights, issues of climate change, we have seen young people at the forefront and they are delivering results. And so if you ask if we can be able to achieve the set target set for ALMA, I would say yes, because young people have proven in other areas that they can deliver. And so what we need here is leadership and to meaningfully engage the young people. And meaningfully, I would say we professionalize the work of young people. Because once we get the support we need, we start ALMA, young people are out there and then they engage. What happens in the next 2 to 3, 5 years when maybe there's no more ALMA? What happens when the young people are no more receiving funding? What happens when they are no more receiving technical support? Does that mean that all the capacity we provided them ends? That should not happen. It means that we should clearly look at the process of professionalizing the various ways that we'll be engaging young people in this process, so that even without ALMA, young people in their own capacities have the skill to initiate projects at their community level. And one of the speakers, Brian Gita, is developing an application. He's an entrepreneur. Clearly, with or without the support of ALMA, young people are going out there and doing, developing applications for malaria testing. So it means that if you are able to provide a support mechanism and professionalize how we engage young people, we would achieve a lot of results. I will just conclude by saying young people in the diaspora like myself, we are willing to engage in this conversation. We are willing to also use the networking we have in the diaspora to help contribute to various funding opportunities that can arise. We'll say reach out to us, engage us meaningfully, and we'll definitely achieve results. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that contribution. And I think it's also important that you highlight the point of meaningful engagement. that young people are ready in many instances, but it's that meaningful engagement and the enabling environment, you know, that allows young people to flourish in these spaces. I'd now want to introduce Mr. Emmanuel Etukudo from Nigeria. Emmanuel is a senior advisor, youth development and innovations to the president of ECOWAS. He's also the team lead at the Girls Tech Gap. Welcome, Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm glad that I was invited to speak on this project. The theme is a meaningful way to engage the young people. And ALMA as an organization is doing a good job by consulting the youth in terms of its approach to develop youth strategies to engage youth in advocacy for malaria and also universal health coverage. I'll be speaking on the adverse impacts of COVID-19 has actually shifted a lot of advocacies from the already existing health-related diseases. So advocacy has always been its divide currently, and we don't want to forget about the already existing issues on the ground. So we at the ECOWAS Youth Council, we are thinking about new approaches, you know, to accommodate the current realities in order for our strategies to actually be able to, you know, generate more positive outcomes. So we have studied wise to, you know, change the way we engage in advocacy. We know young people have actually been involved in a lot of advocacies, and be it a personal group that we've come up with, like what I've been doing with Girls Tech Gap, and then we have seen that COVID-19 actually have taken a lot of attention, and then we have a divided attention in terms of advocacy. So there is need for us to actually rethink our approaches and strategies. So part of which is what we're doing at ECOWAS Youth Council. We have created a sub-community that is going to, you know, spearhead youth development and advocacy. The committee will be selected one participant each from each of the ECOWAS member countries that's going to focus on propagating programs and activities of the ECOWAS Youth Council at the country where they represent. Please, can I have this next slide, please? Okay, so our strategy is very simple, and I want to be very straight to the point because we've already exhausted a lot of time. So we intend to inaugurate 17 committee youth team that will help propagate advocacy programs and activities in the countries they represent, and in order to, you know, consolidate on, you know, our approach, which I've already said earlier. We have been, you know, involved in lots of advocacies, but then, you know, it gets to a point where your approaches actually change, and you need to think about new ways to actually do things in order to be in line with the global trend. So what we intend to do in the next few days, we're about to, like 29th of September, we'll be having an event to, you know, inaugurate the committee members, and then we are going to draw a new roadmap on advocacy, and then we are glad that the Amhs Youth Consultation came at the right time, so we can, you know, inculcate whatever discussion and memorandum that we get from Amhs Consultation at the end of the day into what we would have as the roadmap. So our core strategies for now for the Youth Development Committee, what we intend to set up on the 29th of September would be anchored on ethical reorientation, education, skills and opportunity, healthcare, gender equality, and political participation. So the youth aspect of ECOWAS actually is pushing new limits in terms of advocacy and youth development. And then we want to have new approaches and ways we could, address issues, the borders on health-related diseases. We don't want to be, we don't want our attention to be divided currently because of the COVID-19. So we would actually wait for Alma to take a resolution on whatever will be the outcome of this consultation in order to help us build a formidable roadmap for the related engagement. And I think that will help us have more insight on how to handle health-related advocacies going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution. And I think it's important, first of all, thank you for highlighting the work that ECOWAS is doing. And also thank you for highlighting the fact that we are in the midst of a pandemic. So our approaches should shift to accommodate that. As Farhan mentioned, the beat must continue. So the work will continue if we innovate. Now we're going to take one question. I apologize, I know we are running late, but I appreciate that this is a very engaging session. So we're going to take one question from the floor. And this question is about whether young people are able to or are willing to be involved in this initiative. So the question is, do we have some real examples of young people championing malaria elimination, and how did they do it? How do they do it? So this question I'll direct it to Richard, the panelist.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to young people and examples, I think one of our panelists, Brian Gita, clearly shows an example where he has developed an application for testing and it's working so far. And so I would say that when it comes to malaria broadly, young people have not been meaningfully engaged as much as other areas. Because per my experience, I have seen young people on different international platforms, national platforms with different messages, whether it's sexual reproductive health and right, whether it's climate change, they are visible and they are out there making an impact. But when it comes to malaria, where are the young people? Is the messaging of malaria attractive enough for even young advocates like myself to say, I want to dedicate my time to this advocacy, space? So I would say that Alma is setting the pace, and hopefully once strategies begin to be developed, we, the young people here, we will begin to create strategies that will bring more young people like us who are within the advocacy space to begin to take on the message. Because young people are demonstrating that they can do it in other spaces, and we've seen good and visible examples. We just need to bring as many of young people to the space, meaningfully engage them, and I'm sure we'll see same results.
Thank you for that succinct response, Richard. What I'm hearing is that young people are ready and they're willing to be engaged. And if I can borrow from what another speaker said, that a lot of people are doing things alone, but together through platforms like this, we can make a real difference. So now I'd like to call upon Eunice. Eunice is the Youth Council representative for the Commonwealth. She's the representative of Africa and Europe. And Eunice will be giving us the closing remarks. Thank you, Eunice.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you for that introduction. I'm very honored to be part of this project by Alma. Today, the global health agenda is experiencing an unprecedented time of public and political will and momentum. The fight to end malaria has in recent times become more critical, and there is the urgent need for all stakeholders to work together to ensure that the early steps towards the end goal of malaria elimination are taken. We have heard from young people and older ones on steps their organizations are taking, best practices and suggestions on how we can eradicate malaria. The issues of the world are so interconnected that one area can disrupt all other areas, and we have seen this from the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and from the historical background of malaria. Maybe this is only teaching us that as these issues are interconnected, we all are connected. And to solve any issue, we have to tackle it together, leaving no one behind. Young people are speaking up about issues which not only affect us, but the world at large. We are advocating for a more inclusive society, and our messages are very clear. For instance, youth delegates during the Malaria Summit in London 2018 sent out a very clear message. We want to be the last generation, or we want to be the generation that eliminates malaria. They called on heads of governments to make clear commitments with earmarked domestic financing and to join young people in eliminating malaria by 2030. In February 2020, 25 youth health advocates petitioned the AU to be more committed in ending the malaria epidemic and achieving universal health coverage. Not only are we advocating for the interest of malaria to be institutionalized, we are also working to eradicate the disease whilst coordinating it and emerging it with a broader, encompassing global health agenda, incorporating best practices learned from other areas, health education. Please, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you, Eunice.
Great,
We had lost
great.
you for a second. Please continue.
Great, okay. We also work with regional and national youth councils to develop priorities and ensure that the issues affecting young people are taken to the highest level. Over the past 2 years, we have set up national working groups which implement projects at the grassroots level. For example, we launched the mental health campaign, and this was launched by the Africa and Europe representative of the Commonwealth Youth Council. This was implemented by the national working groups in countries such as Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon. Through the formation of Community Youth Task Force, young people can be recruited, empowered, and trained with the requisite skills for community engagement towards malaria elimination. Young people are using the available technologies to solve several challenges, and there's a need to use these technologies and new technologies to help in eliminating malaria completely and to reach more young people and the affected communities. As a council, we have recognized that we do not only lack the health infrastructure, but we also lack qualified health personnel. There are several young people in the field that lack the technical know-how, and it is very necessary to train young people by equipping them with the requisite skills to do more. New tools in the fight against malaria are easily available, and we have to ensure that young people working or researching in malaria and other poverty-related areas and neglected diseases receive robust funding. We need to engage more youth organizations who have community engagements and projects to eradicate malaria. It is essential to expand the community support by partnering with international organizations in order to institutionalize the fight against malaria. It is short-sighted not to recognize the value of young people in the elimination of malaria. Including young people in all stages of the fight against malaria and the improvement of better health can assure a healthier and better world for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your contributions. And it's I think what's important from you is that we want to be the generation that ends malaria. So
Yeah.
to round off, I'd like to first of all thank all the participants and all the panelists who spoke on this. I'd like to also now encourage you to continue to engage, and there is a survey with the link in the chat box that you can continue to engage us with. There's also links to various social media platforms that you can also engage on. But for now, to end the session off, I'd like to introduce Ms. Petrita Paul. Petrita is a Youth Engagement Officer for the Africa Leaders Malaria Alliance, that's ALMA, and she's a member of the African Union Advisory Council under the Office of the AU Special Envoy on Youth. Thank you, Petrita.
I thank you so much, Ms. Tikwiza, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I would like to acknowledge the great messages shared by our Honorable Excellencies, the AU Commissioner of Social Affairs and also the AU Commissioner of Human Resource Science and Technology, but also recognizing the huge role that His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta has played throughout this process to be able to deliver his message through Honorable Kagwe within his government, and having the Honorable Cabinet Secretary join us today despite their busy schedule. So as Mr. Quiz already mentioned, my name is Apetrida Paul, and I'm an ALMA Youth Engagement Officer, but some of you who might know me, I also serve as an African Union Youth Advisory Council member. So ideally, following up throughout all this series of discussion, I think what we've really gathered clearly is the fact that young people are ready, young people are passionate, and young people do want to keep the ball moving towards the fight to end malaria and ensuring better health access for all. Just to reiterate the fact that as ALMA, we are very much committed to ensure that youth are the center of engagement throughout the development of the ALMA Youth Strategy and towards the formation of the ALMA Youth Advisory Council, but also the Malaria Youth Army chapters, which ideally may be in country or will operate continentally, but all this centers around your feedback to us and directly engaging with us. I'd also like to just bold and cement Richard's point, one of the speakers for the second session, that it's up to the young people themselves to actually help inform us on how best we can help the ALMA Youth Strategy take shape and have the youth ownership itself. It might have a little glitches, it might not be totally perfect, but what we really want is the fresh ideas from the young people themselves that we can help integrate within our strategy, but also the young leaders being part of the process to co-lead with the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, including its partners, to be able to actually roll the ball to fight malaria and ensure better health coverage for all. Just to sum it up as where we are heading towards today's consultation and what are the next steps. Ideally, we are going to continue engaging several young leaders from across Africa in a series of internal consultation, but also still we would really like to hear from all the young people and stakeholders who joined us today. What do they have to say with regards on how best we can inform the youth engagement within the ALMA frameworks and cross-cutting issues, not only malaria, but also NTDs, looking at SRH and other issues. And that's why we have our ongoing survey. I think we have shared the link within the chat box. We have our ongoing survey that is still ongoing until the 22nd of September, and we really appreciate if everyone can take part on it, just to be able to directly get involved with us, despite the fact that we couldn't have enough time to include everyone's views and thoughts within this Pan-African Youth Consultation. But also we've tried to capture all the feedback and questions that everyone has put forward within the Q&A chat box, and will still continue to be engaged. But also I would really also just to as the next step, just to encourage everyone to go through our social media handles and just type in any question, any pending issue that you thought it was not yet raised within Facebook, within Twitter, and then we will have our team address the questions directly to you. And if you have any other pending issue that you think should be raised with regards to moving on to fulfilling our chair's legacy priority 4 agenda on establishing a youth group as part of the leadership process to co-lead and advise the African Leaders Malaria Alliance to tackle malaria and universal health coverage as a whole. And just to say that I wouldn't want to take up much time, I'll just pass on the moderation back to Ms. Tikwiza so as she can be able to close our session and just encourage us to keep the conversation going, because this has just been the launch of the series of online consultations, but we do plan to hear from as many young people from Africa and the diaspora as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrida. And yes, thank you everyone for sticking with us. We are 14 minutes over time, but we appreciate that this has been a valuable session, a consultative session, and where we've begun this conversation that we've been having in our separate, in our different areas, but now bringing it together. As Clelia has put in the chat group, I'd like us to look at the Twitter, to look at the different ways to engage and continue with this conversation, as well as I've mentioned before, the survey that is still open and will be closing in a couple of days' time. So what's left is for me to say thank you. Thank you to the esteemed guests who've been with us. Thank you to the youth who've been participating in this. Thank you for your questions. Thank you to the excellencies for their wonderful addresses. And we really appreciate the platform for youth to engage in matters that concern both us and our future. So everyone have a good afternoon or good morning wherever you are. And thank you very much for engaging with us. Bye-bye.